I just found a love letter from my husband Silas. It's beautiful, poetic, and utterly terrifying. Not because of what it says, but because of the handwriting. It's mine. I'm staring at my own loops and curves, my unique way of crossing a T. But here's the problem. I didn't write this. The letter is dated 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I didn't even know Silas existed. Or at least, that's what I've been told. My name is Aria. I've spent the last 2 years recovering from what Silas calls the incident, a traumatic accident that wiped my long-term memory. He's been my rock, my caregiver, the man who taught me who I am. He showed me photos of our wedding, our travels, our life. But looking at this letter, my skin is crawling. If I wrote this to him before we supposedly met, then our entire history is a lie. I waited until Silas went for his morning run. My heart was a hammer against my ribs as I searched his private study. I shouldn't be doing this. He's done everything for me. But then, tucked behind a row of medical journals, I found it. A hidden folder labeled Subject A. Inside were clinical notes, not about an accident, but about a successful memory implantation. My breath hitched. I wasn't his wife. I was his project. The notes described how my old personality was deconstructed to make room for a more compliant version of Aria. Every memory I have of him, the way we met in the rain, our first dance, the feeling of his hand in mine, it was all scripted. He didn't just save me, he manufactured me. I felt a wave of nausea. But as I turned the page, I saw a photo of the original me. I wasn't a victim. I was a whistleblower he was supposed to silence. The door downstairs creaked open. Silas was back early. I scrambled to shove the folder back, my hands shaking so hard the papers nearly spilled. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate, rhythmic. He stopped right outside the study door. "Aria?" he called out, his voice that same soothing tone he used during my therapy. "Are you in there? I have something new for you to remember." The door downstairs creaked open. Silas was back early. I scrambled to shove the folder back, my hands shaking so hard the papers nearly spilled. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate, rhythmic. He stopped right outside the study door. "Aria?" he called out, his voice that same soothing tone he used during my therapy. "Are you in there? I have something new for you to remember." Silas walked toward me, his hand reaching out to brush a stray hair from my forehead. It was a gesture of love, but now it felt like a claim of ownership. "You look flushed, Aria," he whispered. "Are you feeling the static again?" He calls my confusion static. He says it's a side effect of my healing brain. Now I know the truth. The static is just my real self trying to scream through his lies. He sat me down and pulled a small silver locket from his pocket. "I found this in the attic," he said, clicking it open. Inside was a photo of us on a beach I didn't recognize. This was the day I proposed. "Do you remember the smell of the salt air?" I looked at the photo. The lighting was slightly off, a shadow cast where there shouldn't be one. It was a digital composite. He was testing me. I had to choose. Fight or feign. If I told him I knew, I'd be reset. If I lied, I could find a way out. I closed my eyes, squeezed out a single fake tear and nodded. Yes, I lied, my voice a delicate thread. I remember the waves. They were so loud. Silas exhaled, a sound of pure triumph. He believed he still owned my mind. He didn't realize I had just started my own script. That night, I didn't take the vitamin he gave me. I tucked it under my tongue and spat it out once he left the room. For the first time in 2 years, the fog in my head began to thin. I looked around our bedroom, the soft colors, the locked windows, the lack of sharp edges. It wasn't a home. It was a padded cell designed by a man who claimed to love me. I needed to find his key. Silas thinks he's perfect, but even architects make mistakes. In the back of the hallway closet, hidden behind a stack of spare linens, I found a loose floorboard. Beneath it wasn't a diary or a weapon. It was a single worn-out sneaker, a brand I supposedly never wear, with a name written in Sharpie on the inside of the tongue. Aria Thorne, not Aria Miller. Miller is Silas's last name. Thorne. Thorne feels like a spark in a dark room. I touched the name and my world tilted. I didn't see Silas, I saw a crowded subway station. I saw rain-slicked pavement and a man in a tan coat, not Silas, handing me an envelope. "Get this to the press, Thorne," he had whispered. "It's the only way to stop them." The memory vanished as quickly as it came, leaving me breathless on the closet floor. I wasn't just a wife. I was a threat. I looked up and saw it, a tiny red pinprick of light in the corner of the ceiling. A camera. Had it always been there? My heart stopped. I forced myself to tuck the shoe back, replace the board, and stand up slowly. I grabbed a fresh towel, humming a tune Silas liked, pretending I was just a dutiful wife doing chores. If he saw me find that shoe, the game was over before I even knew the rules. The doorbell rang, a sound I hadn't heard in months. "We don't get visitors." Silas always said my condition made socializing too stressful. I peeked through the curtain and saw a man in a dark suit standing on the porch. He looked tired, his eyes scanning the windows. He looked exactly like the man from my subway memory. He wasn't a stranger. He was my partner. I heard Silas's voice from the kitchen, sharp and cold. "Don't answer that, Aria. It's just a solicitor." He was standing at the end of the hallway, a kitchen knife in his hand. He was only cutting an apple. But the way he gripped it made my blood run cold. He didn't look at the door. He looked only at me. "Come back to the kitchen, honey. Your memory exercise is waiting." Silas didn't move. He just stood there with the apple and the knife, waiting for me to obey. I could feel the stranger's presence through the wood of the front door, just feet away. My partner. My key. "Coming," I said, my voice betraying nothing. I turned my back on the door, and my only hope to follow Silas into the kitchen. The air felt heavy, like I was walking through water. We sat at this small breakfast nook. Silas began to slice the apple with terrifying precision. Each clack of the blade against the wood felt like a countdown. "Who was at the door, Silas?" I asked, trying to sound bored. He didn't look up. "Just a man lost in the wrong neighborhood, Aria. Don't let it clutter your mind. You know how fragile your progress is." He pushed a slice of apple toward me. It looked like a peace offering. It tasted like ash. As he spoke, I noticed something new. On the back of his hand, near the thumb, was a faint, jagged scar. My brain sparked. I didn't see him as my husband. I saw that same hand gripping a steering wheel, knuckles white. I saw rain hitting a windshield. Silas wasn't the one who saved me from the accident. He was in the car. My memory wasn't wiped by a tragedy. It was wiped to cover a crime we committed together. The realization made me dizzy. I needed to reach that man at the door. Later that afternoon, Silas retreated to his study to take a consultation call. This was my window. I hurried to the front window, peeling back the heavy velvet curtains just an inch. The man was still there, sitting in a rusted sedan across the street. He was watching the house. He was waiting for a signal. I grabbed a piece of paper and a thick marker. I wrote one word in giant letters. "Help." I pressed it against the glass for 5 seconds. My heart hammering so loud I was sure Silas could hear it through the walls. The man in the car straightened up. He reached for something on his dashboard. A phone? Then, he nodded. Just a slight sharp tilt of the head. He saw me. I pulled the curtain back just as the study door clicked open. Silas walked out, his face pale. "Aria, we need to talk about your medication," he said, his voice tight. "The lab results came back. Your neural levels are fluctuating. We may need to adjust your treatment." He wasn't just my husband or my doctor anymore. He was my jailer, and the bars of my cage were being reinforced. "I feel fine, Silas," I said, stepping away from the window. He walked toward me, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the curtains. "The sunlight is too bright today," he muttered, pulling them shut and plunging the room into artificial twilight. You shouldn't be near the windows, it triggers the static. He was closing me off from the world, one light source at a time. That night I pretended to sleep, but my mind was a hive of bees. I needed to know what Elias, the man in the car, knew. If I was a whistleblower, what was I blowing the whistle on? I thought back to the folder labeled Subject A. It wasn't just about me. There were other names, other subjects. Silas wasn't just experimenting on his wife. He was running a factory of forgotten souls. I waited until I heard Silas's rhythmic snoring from the other room. I crept out of bed, my bare feet silent on the cold hardwood. I didn't go for the closet this time. I went for his laptop. I knew the password. He used our anniversary date. The date he claimed we met. The 12th of May 22. It worked. The screen glowed, a harsh blue light that felt like a spotlight in the dark. I bypassed the personal files and searched for Thorne. A map popped up, a series of coordinates in the mountains, 3 hours away. And then, a video file. I clicked play with trembling fingers. It was me, but not the Aria I saw in the mirror. This Aria had sharp eyes and a jagged haircut. She looked into the camera and said, "If you're watching this, Silas has already found me. Don't trust the memories. Trust the pain." The video Aria continued, her voice a low rasp. "The project isn't about healing trauma, it's about deleting dissent. They're using the technology to silence anyone who sees the truth about the water filtration scandal." Water. My mind flashed to a series of blueprints. I hadn't been a victim of an accident. I had uncovered a massive environmental poisoning, and Silas was hired to make me forget it. Suddenly, the laptop screen flickered and died. A small window popped up. Remote access detected. My stomach dropped. Silas wasn't just monitoring the house with cameras. He had a digital leash on everything. I looked at the bedroom door. It was still closed, but the house was too quiet. The silence was heavy, expectant. He knew I was awake. I scrambled back to bed, shoving the laptop into its dock just as I heard a faint ping from Silas's phone on the nightstand. An alert. I dove under the covers, forcing my breathing to go slow and deep. I heard the bed creak in the next room. Footsteps. He didn't come to the door. Instead, I heard the sound of the front door deadbolt sliding into place. He was locking us in. The next morning, breakfast was different. There were no apples. Just a single glass of thick, chalky liquid. "A new formula," Silas said, his eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept. "It will help with the visions you've been having. I know you're confused, Aria. I know you think I'm the enemy. But I'm the only one keeping you alive." He pushed the glass toward me. "Drink." I looked at the glass, then at him. The mask was slipping. The loving husband was gone, replaced by a desperate man clinging to a failing experiment. I realized then that I couldn't just run. I had to outsmart the person who built my mind. I took the glass and raised it to my lips, but I wasn't going to swallow. The real war had just begun. I didn't drink the liquid. I feigned a coughing fit, spitting it back into the napkin while Silas reached for a glass of water. To him, I'm just a glitching machine. To me, he's a man who has forgotten that even the most complex locks have a weakness. I need to get a message to Elias, but Silas has turned this house into a digital fortress. My only weapon left is my acting. "I feel better already, Silas," I lied, letting my eyes glaze over slightly. He touched my cheek, his thumb tracing my jawline. "Good. The truth is, Aria, the man you saw at the door, he's the one who hurt you. He's been hunting us for years. He was gaslighting me with the truth, twisting Elias into the villain to keep me in his arms. It was brilliant. It was sickening. I spent the afternoon in the garden, the only place Silas lets me go alone. He watches from the porch, a book in his lap, but his eyes never leave me. I started pulling weeds, moving with a rhythmic, mindless energy. I wasn't gardening, I was measuring. The distance from the fence to the road. The blind spot created by the old oak tree. The gap where the camera's lens couldn't reach. I found a piece of slate near the flower bed and a sharp pebble, while Silas was distracted by a phone call. I scratched a series of numbers into the stone. 104.5. It was the frequency of the local pirate radio station I'd heard Elias listening to in his car. If I couldn't speak to him, I would make him listen to me. I buried the stone near the gate, right where his tires would pass. That night, the static returned, but this time it was real. Not a side effect of his drugs, but a memory. I remembered a password, not to a laptop, but to a safety deposit box. Thorne 09. I whispered it into the darkness of our bedroom. Silas stirred beside me. "What was that?" he mumbled. I froze. "Just a dream," I whispered. "I dreamt of the water, Silas. It was so clear." He sat up, his shadow looming over me like a mountain. "Tell me about the water, Aria." He was testing the depth of my infection. I told him a story of a beautiful lake from my childhood, a place that didn't exist. I watched his tension melt away. He likes it when I hallucinate the right things. He likes it when I'm lost in the world he built for me. The next day, a delivery truck arrived. Silas was busy signing for a package, giving me 3 minutes of freedom. I ran to the fence. Elias's car was gone, but there was a small black device zip-tied to the bottom rail, a high-frequency transmitter. He'd found my note on the stone. I tapped it twice, the signal we'd used in the subway memory. 2 taps for still here. The device vibrated against my fingertips, a response. A Morse code pattern I didn't fully understand yet, but the rhythm felt like a heartbeat. I wasn't alone. But as I pulled my hand back, I saw Silas standing by the front door. He wasn't looking at the delivery man anymore. He was looking directly at the fence. Directly at me. "Aria, get away from there!" He didn't sound like a husband anymore. He sounded like a warden. I sprinted back to the porch, my heart hammering. "There was a wasp," I cried, feigning terror. "A huge one by the rail." He grabbed my arm, his grip bruisingly tight. Searched my eyes for a lie, his face inches from mine. The mask of the loving savior was gone. He dragged me inside and slammed the door. No more garden, no more windows. He began pacing the living room, his hands shaking. "They're getting close, aren't they? They're whispering to you." He started pulling wires from the walls, disconnecting the landline, the router, everything. He was spiraling. His perfect world was cracking, and he was losing control. I realized then that Silas wasn't just a scientist. He was a man who had fallen in love with his own creation. He didn't want to kill me. He wanted to keep me in a jar forever. But a trapped bird eventually learns how to peck at the glass. I watched him mutter to himself, and I realized his greatest fear wasn't me remembering. It was me leaving. "I'm sorry, Silas," I said, my voice soft, maternal. I walked over and placed my hands on his shoulders. He flinched, then collapsed into my arms, sobbing. "I just want you to be safe," he choked out. I stroked his hair, feeling a cold, hard clarity. I was no longer afraid of him. I was his son, and he was a planet that had lost its orbit. While he wept, I reached into his pocket and snagged his keycard. This was the key to the basement, the one place I was never allowed to go. The place where the Subject A files were really kept. If I could get down there, I could find the evidence I needed to destroy his career and win my freedom. I just needed him to fall asleep. I made him tea laced with the very vitamins he'd been forcing on me. I watched him drink it, my face a mask of devotion. "Sleep now, Silas," I whispered. "When you wake up, everything will be different." His eyes grew heavy, his head lolling back against the chair. The architect was finally unconscious in the house he'd built. I stood before the basement door, the keycard cold in my hand. I swiped it. The light turned from red to green with a satisfying click. As the door swung open, a gust of chilled, sterile air hit my face. I stepped into the dark, realizing that I wasn't just looking for my past anymore. I was looking for the weapon that would finish this. The basement wasn't a dungeon, it was a mirror. It was an exact replica of our living room upstairs, but cleaner, colder, and filled with monitors. On every screen was me, Aria sleeping, Aria eating, Aria brushing her hair. I realized I wasn't living in a home, I was living on a stage. And Silas? He wasn't just the director. He was the only audience member. I moved toward a desk covered in hard drives. I found a stack of photos that made my breath catch. They weren't of me and Silas. They were of me and Elias, the man from the car. In the photos, we weren't just partners, we were happy. We were holding hands in front of a small blue house. The love I felt for Silas was a chemical ghost. My heart belonged to the man outside the fence. But then, I saw the medical charts. My hand trembled as I read the headers: Subject A1, Subject A2, Subject A3. All of them were Aria. I wasn't the first version of myself in this house. Every time I started to remember the truth, Silas didn't kill me, he just reset me. I was on my 4th attempt at being his perfect wife. I wasn't a person to him. I was a save file. A low hum vibrated through the floor. A hidden door in the back of the basement slid open. I ducked behind a server rack, my heart nearly stopping. A woman stepped out. She was wearing a lab coat, her face etched with exhaustion. This was Lyra, the assistant Silas mentioned in his notes. She wasn't looking for me. She was checking a series of glass vats against the far wall. I watched from the shadows as Lyra injected a clear fluid into the vats. Inside the glass were millions of tiny glowing organisms. The water filtration project. It wasn't just a scandal. It was a biotech breakthrough Silas was stealing. They weren't poisoning the water to kill people. They were using it to make everyone programmable, just like me. My memory was the prototype for a global cage. I had to move. I stepped out from behind the rack. Lara gasped, dropping her syringe. Aria? How are you down here? Silas said you were in deep sleep. I didn't scream, I didn't run. I looked her dead in the eye and said, I know about Subject A1, and I know you're the one who kept the floorboard loose for me to find the shoe. Lyra's face went pale, then softened into a look of pure pity. I couldn't watch him do it to you again, Aria. You were so close to exposing the filtration project before he captured you. He thinks he's saving you, but he's just burying you alive. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. This is the encryption key. It's the only thing that can stop the rollout. Why, help me now, I whispered. Lyra looked at the monitors, at the hundreds of recorded hours of my life. Because he's starting to target Elias, she said. Silas knows he's outside. He's planning to bring him in for a session tonight. If Elias enters this house, he'll never leave as the same man. The clock was ticking. My partner was walking into a trap. I took the USB drive, but as I turned to the stairs, the monitors flickered. Silas's face appeared on every screen simultaneously. He wasn't asleep. He was in his study, staring into a camera, a cruel smile on his lips. Aria, Aria. His voice echoed through the basement speakers. I told you the vitamins would help with the visions. You're having a very vivid one right now. Lyra, step away from the subject, Silas commanded. The basement door, the only exit, slammed shut with a heavy electronic thud. The lights turned a deep, warning red. So you've reached the end of this cycle, my love. I'm disappointed. I really thought the Thorne identity was purged this time. Gas began to hiss from the vents in the ceiling. Hold your breath, Lyra screamed, grabbing an emergency oxygen mask from a cabinet. She shoved it onto my face. The world began to swirl. Through the haze, I saw Silas enter the basement. He wasn't angry. He looked heartbroken, like a child whose favorite toy had broken. He walked toward me, a syringe in his hand. Don't worry, Aria. We'll start over tomorrow. We'll be happy again. I felt the needle graze my arm, but I didn't flinch. I let him think he'd won. As he injected the sedative, I leaned into him, whispering into his ear. I remember the blue house, Silas. He froze. The shock on his face was the opening I needed. I didn't use violence. I used the one thing he couldn't control, the truth. And Elias is already inside the system. Silas pulled back, confused. What? I held up the USB drive Lyra had given me. It wasn't just an encryption key. It was a transmitter. By plugging it into his main terminal earlier, I hadn't just found files. I had opened a back door for Elias to upload the evidence to the Associated Press. The world was watching us. Right now, through his own security cameras. Silas scrambled for his laptop, his fingers flying across the keys. His face turned a ghostly white as he realized the data was gone. His empire of memories was dissolving in real time. Outside, the distant wail of sirens began to rise, not the police Silas controlled, but federal agents who had been waiting for the signal Elias sent. I stood tall, the sedative failing to take hold because Lyra had swapped it for saline hours ago. I looked at the man who tried to rewrite my soul and felt nothing but cold, hard triumph. You didn't build a wife, Silas, I said as the basement door was kicked open by men in tactical gear. You built your own executioner. The sirens were loud, but the men in tactical gear didn't move like federal agents. They moved like ... machines. They ignored Silas. They ignored Lyra. They walked straight to the monitors and began systematically smashing them. I looked at the USB drive in my hand. The upload light was red. It hadn't sent a thing. Elias wasn't rescuing me. He was being used to lure me out. Silas stopped panicking. He stood up, brushed the dust off his lab coat and looked at me with a terrifyingly calm smile. Did you really think it would be that simple, Aria? The federal agents are my security team. The encryption key was a tracking beacon. And Elias? Silas gestured to the door. Elias walked in, but he wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing the same hospital gown I had woken up in 2 years ago. Elias? I whispered, my world fracturing. He looked at me, but his eyes were empty. 2 hollow pools of static. Who is Elias? He asked, his voice monotone. Silas stepped between us. Elias was the whistleblower, Aria. You were just his handler. I didn't reprogram you to love me. I reprogrammed you to forget that you were the one who betrayed him to save yourself. The floor felt like it was disappearing. Every truth I had found in the last hour was being inverted. Silas wasn't the monster who stole my life. He was the man I hired to hide me from my own guilt. You came to me, Aria, Silas whispered, pulling a contract from the desk. It bore my real signature, so you paid me to make you believe you were an innocent victim. It was the only way you could live with what you did. I stared at the contract. The date was from before the incident. I saw the blue house photo again. In the background, the house wasn't being lived in, it was burning. I saw myself holding a lighter. The betrayal wasn't Silas's, it was mine. I had sold out the water project for a payday, and when the guilt broke my mind, I asked Silas to erase the monster I had become. No, I screamed, clutching my head. That's not true. You're planting this is another layer. But Lyra, the woman I thought was my ally, stepped forward. She wasn't an assistant. She was a psychologist. Aria, the static isn't the truth coming back. The static is your subconscious trying to reject the therapy. You're having a psychotic break. We need to reset the cycle. This was the ultimate psychological trap. If I believed them, I was a monster. If I didn't, I was insane. I looked at Elias, the man I supposedly loved and supposedly betrayed. He was staring at a blank wall, humming a tune I recognized. It was the song I had been humming in the garden. He wasn't a subject. He was the original. I was the copy. Silas approached me with a new syringe, one filled with a shimmering gold liquid. This is the final version, Aria. No more guilt, no more Thorne, just peace. Just us. I looked at the needle, then at the man I had betrayed. A tiny detail caught my eye. Elias's hand. He was tapping his thigh. 2 taps. Still here. My heart skipped. If Elias was wiped, He wouldn't know the signal from the subway memory. Silas had told me the subway memory was a lie, but if it was a lie, how did Elias know the code? I realized the truth. Silas was lying now. He had broken Elias, and now he was trying to break me by making me believe I was the villain. It was the ultimate gaslight. I didn't fight the men. I didn't scream. I looked at Silas and let a tear fall. "You're right," I whispered. "I remember now. I'm the monster. Please, make it stop. Erase me." Silas's eyes lit up with a sick, messianic joy. He loved the idea of me being saved by him. He leaned in to administer the gold liquid, his guard completely down. In one fluid motion, I didn't grab the needle. I grabbed the heavy glass paperweight from the desk, the one with the Aria Thorne inscription. I didn't hit him. I smashed it against the main server rack behind him. Sparks flew. The room plunged into darkness as the cooling system failed. "If I'm a monster," I hissed in the dark, "then let's see how you handle the fire." The security team scrambled in the dark. I grabbed Elias's hand. His grip was like iron. He had been faking the empty look just as I had been faking the broken wife. We didn't head for the stairs. We headed for the vats of the filtration project. If the world was going to be programmed by this water, then the architect needed to go down with his blueprint. "Aria, stop!" Silas's voice was frantic in the dark. "If you break those vats, the bioagents will release. You'll never be able to leave this house." I reached the main valve. "I've already left, Silas," I shouted back. "The Aria you built died the moment I stopped believing your stories." I turned the valve with everything I had. The glass shattered. Not from my strength, but from the pressure Silas had built into the system. The glowing blue liquid flooded the floor, dissolving the wires, the monitors, and the lies. The agents fled as the chemical alarms began to blare. The real ones this time. The house was being quarantined. Elias and I stood on the only dry ground, the stairs. Silas was on the other side of the room, trapped by his own creation. I looked at the man who tried to own my mind and felt a strange sense of pity. He was the one who was truly lost. "You wanted me to be perfect," I said, as the emergency lights flickered on. "But I'd rather be real and broken than a masterpiece made of lies." The alarms were a deafening choir of chaos. Silas was trapped behind a wall of his own glowing chemicals, his perfect world dissolving into a toxic blue puddle. Fias pulled me toward the ventilation shaft, the only way out that wasn't electronically locked. "Go," he urged. But I stopped. I wasn't leaving without the one thing Silas feared most. The original data. I waded through the shallow blue liquid, the fumes stinging my eyes. I reached the master terminal. While the system rebooted for quarantine, a 30-second window opened. I didn't just download the evidence of the water scandal. I downloaded the code for the Aria protocol, the very software Silas used to rewrite memories. If this power existed, it shouldn't belong to a madman. It should belong to me. "Aria, the roof is collapsing!" Elias shouted. I grabbed the drive and scrambled into the vent, just as the basement door buckled under the pressure of the fire suppression foam. We crawled through the dark, narrow space, the sound of my own breathing the only thing I could trust. For the first time in years, I wasn't following a script. I was writing the path as I went. We emerged onto the roof, the cold night air hitting us like a physical blow. Below, the security team was being intercepted, not by feds, but by the local media Elias had alerted via an automated timer. Cameras were everywhere. Flashbulbs popped like tiny stars. Silas's secrets were being broadcasted live to the Associated Press before he could even crawl out of the basement. I looked at Elias in the moonlight. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright with the recognition that went deeper than memory. "Is it over?" he asked. I felt the weight of the USB drive in my pocket. "No," I whispered. "It's just the beginning. They'll try to say we're crazy. They'll try to say the evidence is forged. We need to be smarter than they are." The aftermath was a whirlwind. The authorities arrived and the architect's house was cordoned off as a biohazard site. Silas was taken away in handcuffs, screaming that I wasn't finished yet. He was right. I wasn't finished. I spent the next 6 months in hiding, not as a victim, but as a ghost. Using Silas's own encryption, I stayed one step ahead of the corporations involved. I realized something while watching the news from a small apartment in a city Silas couldn't find. He thought he was the architect, but he was just a builder. The mind isn't a house. It's a living, breathing thing. He could change the wallpaper and lock the doors, but he couldn't change the foundation. My foundation wasn't my memory. It was my will. I finally met Elias at that blue house from the photo. The real one, the one that hadn't burned down. It was a safe house we'd set up years ago. He handed me a cup of coffee, his hand no longer shaking. "Do you remember why we did it?" he asked. I looked at the sunset. I don't need to remember the past to know what I have to do for the future. We leaked the final files. The water project was dismantled, stocks tumbled, CEOs resigned, and the programmable technology was banned globally. Silas was sentenced to life in a psychiatric facility, the very kind of place he used to run. I visited him once. I didn't say a word. I just showed him a photo of myself, thriving. It was the ultimate victory. As I walked away from the prison, I felt a sense of peace that no drug could provide. I had been betrayed by my love, my doctor, and even my own mind. But I had come out on the other side not just as Aria Thorne, but as something new, something untouchable. I realized that the greatest weapon against a lie is a person who refuses to believe it. Walking away from that prison felt different than any step I had taken in years. For the first time, my feet didn't feel like they were following a preset path. The air was cold, sharp, and honest. Silas was behind glass now, a man whose only remaining power was the air he breathed. I realized that the real prison wasn't the house or the basement. The real prison was the belief that I needed his permission to exist. I sat on a park bench and watched the world go by. People were scrolling on their phones, drinking coffee, laughing at jokes. None of them knew how close they had come to losing their own narratives. The news cycle was already moving on from the Silas Miller scandal, but the digital footprint of the Aria protocol was still in my pocket. I wasn't just a survivor. I was the keeper of a secret that could change the world. I didn't destroy the drive. Instead, I spent weeks working with Elias to strip the code of its predatory nature. We turned the technology inside out. What was once a tool for deleting dissent became a tool for restoring trauma. We leaked the patches to independent clinics globally. We didn't just stop a crime. We provided the cure for the very scars Silas used to control people like me. Elias and I met at a small cafe near the water, a real place with real history. He looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't search his eyes for a clue or a signal. I just looked at him. "Do you think we can ever be normal?" he asked. I smiled, and it felt like the first genuine emotion I'd had in a lifetime. "Normal is just another script, Elias. Let's try for something real instead." I legally reclaimed the name Aria Thorne. The court proceedings were long, but every time the judge said my name, it felt like a brick being added back to a house that had been leveled. I didn't want the life Silas had planned for me, and I didn't even want the life I had before the whistleblower scandal. I wanted the version of myself that had the strength to survive both. I started a foundation for victims of psychological manipulation. It's not just a charity, it's a lighthouse. Every time I see someone walk through those doors with that familiar static in their eyes, I feel a surge of triumphant purpose. I am no longer the subject of an experiment. I am the architect of the solution. Helping others reclaim their minds is how I finally finished rebuilding my own. One evening, I found that old photo of the blue house. I didn't flinch. I didn't wonder if it was a fake. I simply walked to the fireplace and dropped it in. I watched the edges curl and blacken until the image of the perfect couple was nothing but smoke. I don't need a physical photo to tell me where I've been. My heart keeps its own records now, and they are completely unhackable. The silence in my new apartment is beautiful. There are no cameras in the corners, no microphones in the vents, just the sound of the wind and the hum of my own thoughts. I used to be afraid of the silence, thinking it was a void where Silas would plan a new lie. Now, I realize silence is the canvas. For the first time in my life, I am the only one holding the brush. Elias called me today. He found a small cottage by the coast, no blueprints, no hidden labs, just a garden that needs tending. He asked if I wanted to help him plant something that would actually grow. I realized then that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your ability to trust. It just means your trust is now a hard-earned gift, not a vulnerability. We aren't starting over. We're just starting. I stood on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Millions of people, millions of stories, all intersecting in the dark. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to speak to them, to tell them what I had learned. Not as a victim, and not as a headline, but as a witness to the power of the human spirit. I picked up my phone, hit record, and prepared to deliver the most important message of my life. You're listening to this because you've felt it too. The static. The feeling that someone else is holding the pen to your life story. Maybe it's a toxic relationship, a job that drains you, or a past you think you can't escape. But listen to me. The architects of your life only have power if you stay in the rooms they built for you. You are not a draft. You are the final, definitive edition. Your memories don't define you, your choices do. Betrayal is a fire. It can either turn you to ash, or it can forge you into steel. I chose the steel. I chose to take the fragments of my shattered reality and sharpen them into a blade. Your mistakes are not your destiny. You are the only person with the permanent, absolute right to inhabit your own mind. Do not let them take that from you. They will tell you that you're fragile. They will tell you that you need them to survive. They will try to rewrite your worth based on their own greed or their own insecurities. Let them try. Because once you realize that you decide what is real, their walls start to crumble. Their locks start to turn. You are the master of your own internal architecture. Stop living in their shadows. Resilience isn't just bouncing back. It's moving forward with the scars that prove you survived. Every time Silas tried to erase me, I grew back stronger. I grew back louder. Don't be afraid of the broken pieces of your life. Those cracks are where the light gets in. Use them. Own them. Build a version of yourself that is so authentic it becomes untouchable. I lost 3 years to a lie, but I gained a lifetime of clarity. Trusting yourself is the most radical act of rebellion you can commit in a world that wants you to be compliant. Reclaim your name, reclaim your story. The pen is back in your hand. So what are you going to write next? Don't wait for permission. The world doesn't give it. You have to take it for yourself. My name is Aria Thorne. I am not a project. I am not a memory. I am the victor of my own life. And you are just getting started. Look in the mirror and see the architect staring back at you. The static is gone. The signal is clear. This is your life. And it is beautiful because it is yours. Own it, every single piece of it. Thank you for walking through the maze with me. If this story found you today, perhaps it was meant to. Go out there and build something real. The world is waiting for your truth. Short pause, my story is done, ... but yours? Yours is just beginning.